Hello and welcome to the Prime Reckoning. I'm Julie and this is a channel for women over 50. I was out with my friends the other night and we were talking about the instances of problems that we as women have getting our issues diagnosed when we go to the doctor. I know that I have experienced this myself. And probably many of you have experienced this as well. So I wanted to go through a little bit of information. I pulled up an article. All the articles are giving me the same statistics and data. So we'll go through this one in a minute. But I just wanted to talk about my experience a little bit first. So a couple of years ago, I started experiencing a problem where I just couldn't wake up. I slept all night and all day, and I just couldn't wake up. I called in sick to work. I was out on FMLA trying to figure out what's going on with my body, why I never felt rested, why I didn't have the energy to do anything. I was spending all my days in the bed or on the couch, just sleeping, basically. So I went to my PCP. He initially referred me, I believe, to a cardiologist. And then I was referred to an endocrinologist. Also, probably said that wrong again. But went and did all the various tests. The endocrinologist didn't do much. They said, no, you don't. That's your problem's not any kind of syndrome or anything that can be treated. And I may have seen the PA the first time I went to my PCP, but I remember after going to all these different doctors and then going back to the PCP again and saying, this, I'm still having this problem. What can I do? And at that point, he told me that it was all in my head and that I should go see a psychiatrist. So I proceeded to dump that PCP right away. And so I kind of reached out to my friends to see if anybody had a doctor in my area that they really liked. And my neighbor said that she was pretty happy with her doctor. So I went to see this doctor. And I told him, I said, there's a lot riding on this. I said, I have been to so many doctors and, I need to get your opinion about what I should do next. And he said to me, well, let's start at the beginning. Tell me everything. And I told him everything that was going on. He sat and listened to me for 45 minutes and we had a back and forth discussion. He was asking me a lot of questions, getting a lot of information. And he said, well, there's some of your medication here that may be causing you some problems. He said, I don't remember if we lightened up on it or stopped it completely. I think we lightened up on it and then I ended up stopping it completely. And within a week I was fine. So, the medicine that my former PCP had given me was causing me this problem. And it, for whatever reason, he didn't say, oh, let's take you off this medicine. Let's change this around, see what's going on. It was as simple as that. I wasn't sick. I was having issues with my medications, and reducing it or coming off of it solved my problem. So, but there's so much stuff like that. You hear stories about this all the time. Women not being properly diagnosed for whatever reason. We're going to go through some of the reasons here. But this happens a lot. This is not an isolated incident at all. So let's take a look at this article from Prevention And it's titled Inside the Epidemic of Misdiagnosed Women. We looked into why so many female patients struggle to get accurate answers from healthcare practitioners. So, when it comes to heart disease, recent studies show that women have a 50% higher chance than men of receiving the wrong initial diagnosis after a heart attack, and are 25% more likely to be misdiagnosed after a stroke. That's not all. One new study from the University of Copenhagen found that women are diagnosed an average of 4 years later than men when it comes to more than 700 diseases, and 2.5 years later in the case of cancer. For women of color, the disparities in care are even greater, despite the fact that Black women are often at higher risk of developing things like stroke and Alzheimer's disease. So, why are so many women misdiagnosed? Consider the fact that until very recently, medical research was done exclusively on white men, though the results were applied to both men and women of all ethnicities. For example, take the sleep aid Ambien. It was on the market for more than 20 years before researchers realized that men metabolized the drug faster, which meant that the dose needed to be cut in half for women. Women also tend to have a different style of talking about medical symptoms than men do. And it doesn't mesh well with the amount of time the average doctor gets to spend with patients. While men often give doctors a succinct list of symptoms, women are more likely to build a narrative around how they're feeling. So, what can we do about it? Understanding that the problem exists in the first place is a good start and can inspire you to be proactive when interacting with your clinical team. If you think you're getting the brush off or that your doctor isn't taking your concerns seriously, ask your provider a simple question. What else could this be? This is the universal antidote for diagnostic errors. Ideally, it will shake your doctor out of his intuitive mode of thinking and prompt him to really consider other options. It is also suggested that you ask even more questions if you feel your doctor may be missing something. It's okay to ask things like, is this the best drug for me? And is there enough data to show it'll work as well in women as it does in men? So the 6 conditions that are most likely to be misdiagnosed in women, the first one is heart disease. And as many people know, women typically don't have the textbook heart attack symptoms. Women's symptoms are different. So if you're not familiar with those, you may want to Google them and keep an eye on that for yourself. While chest pain is still a primary symptom, we usually see other vagus symptoms like generalized fatigue, nausea, and back, neck, and jaw pain. Add to this fact the standard testing physicians still use to detect heart disease was devised for and tested on men's hearts. So it isn't as good as discerning heart disease in women who have smaller blood vessels around the heart. I know that personally. I went to the ER one night in the middle of the night. I just felt really, really strange. And I went, and when I got there, I mentioned that I was concerned that it might be my heart. And boy, if you go to the ER, that is the thing to say if you want to get pushed to the very beginning of the line. My local hospital usually isn't very crowded, but they did an EKG on me right there in the waiting room and got me right back. Fortunately, it wasn't a heart problem. They never figured out what it was, but I was concerned just because I felt so strange. So how to advocate for yourself. Ask yourself if you have any of these risk factors: a family history of heart issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, or high cholesterol, an autoimmune disease like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, or a history of gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, or eclampsia when you were pregnant. All of these increase your chances of both heart disease and stroke. The next condition is autoimmune diseases. It takes an average of 5 doctors in nearly 4 years to get an accurate autoimmune diagnosis, and women make up a whopping 75% of autoimmune disease sufferers. The tricky part is that things like fatigue, mood changes, and pain are symptoms of countless conditions. Women also get brushed off for exaggerating their pain. Because so many parts of the body can be affected by an autoimmune condition, you might see a psychologist and 2 or more medical doctors. In an ideal world, all of your providers will talk to one another about your case. To make this easier, try to choose a medical center where physicians who specialize in complex cases work with one another to figure out what's going on with patients. With autoimmune conditions, if you focus on just one thing, you'll never get a breakthrough. How to advocate for yourself? Ask for a blood test that looks for antibodies for the most common autoimmune diseases, and make sure your doctor is open to continual testing. Antibodies can indicate several diseases. Ideally, your doctor will take blood every year to look at trends and narrow down the possibilities. The next condition is endometriosis and polycystic ovary syndrome. So, polycystic ovary syndrome is another condition that often goes undetected, usually because the diagnostic signs, such as acne and hair on the face and body, blood work evidence of elevated androgen hormones, irregular or absent periods, or ovaries that look abnormal on an ultrasound, aren't always assessed at first. First, your doctor will likely rule out thyroid disease and depression, which can present with similar symptoms. Also, if your pelvic pain gets worse just before your period starts and you're feeling irritable or experiencing symptoms such as hair thinning or loss, hot flashes, or night sweats, these could be signs of perimenopause, which can begin up to 10 years before your period stops. If your doctor prescribes a treatment for your symptoms and it doesn't work, make sure to tell your doctor. Say, you suggested this, I tried it for as long as you said I should, and it's not working. What is the next step? If you don't get a satisfactory response or a different dose, a different therapy, or further investigation, see another doctor. The next condition is sleep apnea. Until recently, sleep specialists thought that for every woman out there with sleep apnea, a disorder that increases the risk of high blood pressure, heart failure, and stroke, there were 9 or 10 men with it. Thanks to research in the early 90s that looked at both men and women, it's now clear that the actual ratio is more like 2 to 3 men for every woman with the condition. Yet most physicians still miss the signs in women. One reason is that women can have vague symptoms, things like chronic fatigue, feeling down, and weight gain, that prompt many doctors to treat them for conditions like low thyroid and mood disorders. A lot of providers still have this predefined notion of a patient who has sleep apnea being a middle-aged, overweight male. This means a lot of women aren't even asked questions about their sleep. There's also the fact that while many women urge their husbands to see a sleep specialist if they snore or have bouts of stopping breathing and then gasping for air in the middle of the night, men don't often do the same with regard to their wives. How to advocate for yourself? Sleep apnea should be on your radar if you have PCOS, snore, are overweight, or have a family history of sleep apnea. Your risk also increases after menopause. If you're experiencing fatigue, mood shifts, or weight gain, or you feel off most days, discuss sleep apnea with your primary care doctor. The next one is breast and ovarian cancer. With all the awareness surrounding regular screenings, as well as advances in imaging technology designed to spot breast cancer, you'd think the number of misdiagnoses would be low. Yet one study found that as many as 31% of all breast cancer cases are misdiagnosed. The issue is twofold, and an expert on cancer screening and early detection stated in some cases, distinguishing between benign lesions and early stage breast cancer is challenging. In other cases, the disease often doesn't show up as a mass and may not be found via a mammogram or even a follow-up sonogram. A woman may say one breast feels different, and then when a mammogram and sonogram are negative, her doctor might say it's just normal changes that happen as you get older. The same is true for ovarian cancer, which can present with subtle symptoms like bloating, which prompts many doctors to think it's a GI issue. This, along with the fact that there is no early detection test, leads to diagnosis only when the cancer is advanced. In fact, according to the American Cancer Society, only about 20% of ovarian cancers are found at an early stage. When you've had a colonoscopy, seen a gastroenterologist, and changed your diet to manage symptoms and you don't have answers or feel better, ask about having a CAT scan or an MRI, or get a referral to an ovarian cancer specialist. When the workup is negative but symptoms persist, you need to keep circling back. You've got to be your own best advocate. How to advocate for yourself after a breast cancer diagnosis. Get a second opinion to confirm the diagnosis and plan of action. The same goes if you've been told you don't have cancer, but symptoms tell you that something's not right. Also, tell your doctor about bloating, stomach pains, or other issues in your belly that could indicate ovarian cancer. So again, ladies, it's all about advocating for ourselves and pushing doctors, asking them the right questions, and staying on it until you feel that you're being listened to. You know, you hear so many stories about women that knew something was wrong, and just doctors kept telling them, no, everything's normal. No, you're in menopause. That's what's causing all this stuff. If you feel that something's not right with your body, you need to stay on top of it and keep pushing the doctors until you get a diagnosis. Again, I'm not a doctor or a medical professional, but looking at this information, having been there myself, fortunately, I didn't have anything horrible, but I've heard lots of stories about women who were eventually diagnosed with cancer after years of telling the doctor, I know something's wrong with me, and the doctor keeps saying, no, everything's fine. So you do need to advocate for yourselves. So be very aware of that, and keep fighting until you feel like you've got a solution to what's going on. So that is our article for the day. Let's move on to our Badass Woman of the Week. The woman we're going to talk about this week is named Rachel Louise Carson. She was born in 1907 and was an American marine biologist, writer, and conservationist whose sea trilogy and book Silent Spring are credited with advancing marine conservation and the global environmental movement. So in the mid-1940s, Ms. Carson had become concerned about the use of synthetic pesticides, many of which had been developed through the military funding of science since World War II. Carson began the 4-year project of what would become Silent Spring by gathering examples of environmental damage attributed to DDT. As her research progressed, Carson found a sizable community of scientists who were documenting the physiological and environmental effects of pesticides. She also took advantage of her connections with many government scientists who supplied her with confidential information. From reading the scientific literature and interviewing scientists, Carson found 2 scientific camps when it came to pesticides: those who dismissed the possible danger of pesticide spraying, barring conclusive proof, and those who were open to the possibility of harm and willing to consider alternative methods such as biological pest control. By 1959, the USDA's Agricultural Research Service responded to the criticism by Carson and others with a public service film. Carson characterized it as flagrant propaganda that ignored the dangers that spraying pesticides posed to humans and wildlife. That spring, Carson wrote a letter published in the Washington Post that attributed the recent decline in bird populations to pesticide overuse. That was also the year of the Great Cranberry Scandal. The 1957, 58, and 59 crops of U.S. cranberries were found to contain high levels of the herbicide, aminotriazole, which caused cancer in lab rats, and the sale of all cranberry products was halted. Carson attended the subsequent FDA hearings on revising pesticide regulations. She came away discouraged by the aggressive tactics of the chemical industry representatives, which included expert testimony that was firmly contradicted by the bulk of the scientific literature she had been studying. Research at the Library of Medicine of the National Institutes of Health brought Carson into contact with medical researchers investigating the gamut of cancer-causing chemicals. Of particular significance was the work of the National Cancer Institute researcher and Environmental Cancer Section founding director Wilhelm Huber, who classified many pesticides as carcinogens. Carson found evidence to support the pesticide-cancer connection. Silent Spring, Carson's most influential book, was published on September 27, 1962. The book described the harmful effects of pesticides on the environment, and it is widely credited with helping launch the environmental movement. Carson was not the first or only person to raise concerns about DDT, but her combination of scientific knowledge and poetic writing reached a broad audience and helped to focus opposition to DDT use. Carson's main argument is that pesticides have detrimental effects on the environment because their effects are rarely limited to the target pests. DDT is a prime example, but other synthetic pesticides come under scrutiny. Carson also accuses the chemical industry of intentionally spreading disinformation and public officials of accepting industry claims uncritically. Most of the book is devoted to the pesticide's effect on natural ecosystems. However, it also details cases of human pesticide poisoning, cancer, and other illnesses attributed to pesticides. The academic community, by and large, backed the book's scientific claims. Public opinion soon turns Carson's way as well. The chemical industry campaign backfired as the controversy greatly increased public awareness of potential pesticide dangers as well as book sales. Pesticide use became a major public issue, especially after the CBS Reports TV special on the book that she wrote. In one of her last public appearances, Carson testified before President JFK's Science Advisory Committee. The committee issued its report on May 15, 1963, largely backing Carson's scientific claims. Following the report's release, she also testified before a United States Senate subcommittee to make policy recommendations. So some fabulous work there by Ms. Carson. So that is all the information for today. If you would please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And you could also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I will link all that information below. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye.